Today I am working on a Craftsman 21-inch push mower. It's got the bagging attachment. This has the Briggs and Stratton Gold engine series, the 6.75 190cc engine. Like all Briggs engines, and I've made several videos on these are great motors. Usually when they stop running, it's usually something carburetor related. On this one I'm working on it for a friend of mine. No idea what's happened to it. Very first thing I notice is when I look at this is that it's got a brand new spark plug in it. So I already know that's probably not the problem. It probably wasn't the problem to begin with. Rarely do spark plugs go bad in these little motors unless they've been broken. They just don't run long enough or hot enough for the spark plug to really be an issue. But that's usually one of the first things that most people try to do to get them going again. What I'm going to do to verify that spark is not the issue, especially since there's a new plug in here, is use a spark checker, and I have not shown this before, but all we're going to do is put this in place basically at the spark plug. You're going to plug it into the spark plug cable, and then you're going to find a ground. I usually just put it here on the head somewhere, or on a head bolt, and just put that clamp somewhere on the head bolt. And then this takes two people to do. You're going to give the starter string a pull, and you should see some sparks flying from the middle electrode there out to the outer ring here of this checker. So I'll see if I can get that on video for you. Okay, I've got this rigged up to where hopefully you can see this. I should throw some sparks when I pull on this handle. And regardless of whether you can see that or not, you should be able to hear it snap. And that is a sign that our electrical system is fine. Spark plug, I'm sure, is fine, especially on this motor as it's brand new. So we're going to focus on the fuel system and see what we got. To gain access to the carburetor on one of these style engines, you're going to need a flat blade screwdriver, or I think this is a 10 millimeter headed bolt, and you're just going to unscrew this. And if it's not been boogered up already, the screw should not come completely out of the housing. You're going to back it off. See, you should not be able to pull it out of there, okay? So you don't think that you have to pull it all the way out. You don't. It'll come loose. And it looks like this has a brand new air filter on it. Also something that's commonly changed on these motors when they don't run. Usually is not the issue. Yeah, this is brand new. And you should always clean this thing out if you're going to go to the trouble of putting an air filter in there, but that may be opinion. So there's 3 more screws here that you have to take out. So we'll get and I'll get the exact size and let you know what they are, and then we'll get this backing cover off of the air cleaner, and then we can see the carburetor there. So these are actually 8 millimeter bolt heads, and for these small engines, I typically like these nut drivers, usually because these things just whiz right out. It's no problem. These are quick. You don't have to set up the ratchet. On this motor, these things were extremely tight. I've gotten them loose now. That either tells me one of 2 things. One is that this has been off and somebody put them back on without realizing, how small hardware works and torqued them way too tight, or they've never been off at all and this thing has been exposed to the elements and there's been corrosion on there. With these are typically steel screws, and a lot of times what it's mounting to is aluminum, so you've got some corrosion built up in there. And I believe that's probably the issue, because when I took this one out, you can see that there's some corrosion definitely on the inside of that. I'm just glad it didn't strip out whatever it's mounted to inside there. Only trick with these, I just go slow. Just take it easy, go slow, and feel your way through it. So we'll take these other 2 off, and that's the same size bolt head that is on your air filter cover. And with all those 3 bolts off, this thing will come right off. If you notice, I didn't take this one out up top. You can, it just separates that black piece from this black piece. If you want to just leave it on there, do it. and then this will all come off as one piece. You can see already how gunked up this is. Who knows what I'm really going to find in here, but pretty sure, again, folks, that we're going to find a gummed up carburetor on the inside, or a sunken float or something in here inside the float bowl. If not, I'm pretty sure whatever it is, we're going to find it and we're going to be able to fix it. To get better access to everything, we're going to take the 2 Phillips screws out here and here that are holding this red plastic cover on. It's given all the signs this motor is showing us, and you can see from the amount of dirt that's on it. I'm going to go ahead and take the carburetor off, clean it out. I'm going to show you how to do that. And the first step I'm going to do is, you could just take this fuel line off. You can take that, squeeze that clamp together, move it back, and take the fuel line off the inlet of the carburetor. I'm going to go ahead and remove the fuel tank assembly just to get everything cleaned out, and then I don't have to worry about plugging this line, which invariably, no matter how you plug it, they tend to leak, or at least they do for me. So all you really have to do to take this off is there's 3 8mm bolts that hold this on around the top, and then there's one mounting bolt right here, which I believe is a 10mm. So take those 4 off, and then this whole entire fuel tank I can just tilt it back, kind of the same way I did this top cover here. You won't have to worry about the fuel, and we've got pretty much as much access to the carburetor as we need. And you can see this thing will just tip backwards. Now we can take this clamp off the fuel line here, and then just slide that fuel line off, and then we really won't have any gas leakage. And then I can clean some of the gunk out of all this as well. Probably easiest to take a pair of slip joint pliers, as it's a fairly small clamp. Clamp the ends of it together, and then just slide it down here somewhere on the hose. Depending on how long this fuel line has been on here, they can be a challenge to get off. So I'm going to start with a flat blade screwdriver. Try to just pry easy and wiggle it off. That's how you start. Sometimes that is not how you wind up finishing. Okay, so on this one, I'm just going to use my slip joint pliers gently, as this is not stuck on too bad. I'm going to grab a hold of this rubber hose and just squeeze it with enough pressure to grip it, and then start sliding it backwards off of the inlet to the carb, and then voila, it's off. No gas leakage, so you don't have to worry about that. You can see here the inlet is fairly corroded, and I have a feeling that that's what we're going to find inside this carburetor too, which is why this thing doesn't run. Before you start taking any bits and pieces off the carburetor, you should take a video, kind of like what I'm doing here, and look at the way the springs are set up and attached, which way they're oriented, so you don't have this spring up here when you're putting it back together because you couldn't remember. This is easy for me because I'm making a video for you guys, but if you're just doing this and you're in a hurry, a lot of times things just have a way of almost falling apart when you're taking them apart, and you don't remember how it hooked back up. Then you got stuff like this, where this goes back in here into the deep dark recesses under the cover of the motor. Make sure you have a look in there so that you know what you're doing when you put it back together. There's nothing worse than going through all this work and then going, oh crap, I don't remember how this works. Then you take your best guess, and you're probably not going to get it quite right, because I must have worked on probably I don't know, 50 of these little Briggs and Stratton's motors over the years, and maybe 10 of them have had the same spring setup on the carburetors. They're all just a little bit different. I don't know why, but I can tell you that if you don't pay attention, you will eat your lunch trying to figure it out. So, just a word to the wise. Also, if you have a motor that is dirty like this, before you really start digging around on the carburetor, make sure you keep the air inlet to the carburetor clean, block it with something, or knock all the gunk off of over the top of it like I have here. I've cleaned it off pretty well. You don't want to get that stuff inside there because you're just going to have to clean it back out anyway. So make sure you're keeping the stuff as clean as you reasonably can when you're doing it. Once you've taken your notes, you've looked and seen how everything is hooked up, then you can start taking things off. And what you're going to find here is that you've got two 10mm head bolts. There's one here, and then there's one right here that we're going to have to unscrew. Then you're either going to hook this spring from here and just leave it attached to the carburetor over here, or maybe we can undo this end a little easier than this one. It doesn't matter. Whatever way is easiest, don't take it off both ends. Okay, that'll save you at least half the trouble of getting it hooked back up. And then I'm going to guess, but probably with just a little bit of pulling from the pliers, we can unhook this spring from this end up here. And it's been a while since I worked on one of these, but I think we're going to have to undo this bolt here. This is probably another 8mm head. We'll undo this, and then that should be all of the attachments to the carburetor. And once we have those two big mounting bolts loosened, or out of the way, I should say. Once we have those two 10mm bolts out of the way, that carburetor itself should come off with just a little gentle prying. So when you're taking these springs off, you want to be very, very careful with them, so that you don't break them, because you don't want to have to buy these, and that you remember where they hooked and how they hooked. Use needle-nose pliers and just gently remove them from the mounting. This one back here, you can see, is already coiled up, and it attaches right up here. When it's attached up here, there's a lot of tension on it. When you take it off this thing, hold your pliers firmly. Don't let it snap back, because it'll probably either break or come loose off the attach point over here. You're going to have to find it and figure out how to hook it all back up again. Just go slow with it. This bolt head up here, earlier I said it was an 8mm. It's about a 1/4 inch. Socket fits on it just perfectly. So we're going to loosen this up, take it out, and then we'll take out those two 10mm bolts holding the carb on. And again, with a piece like this, so this is obviously going to stay on the motor when we take the carburetor off, but make sure you look and see, what is it attached to, how does it fit in here, what's going on with it. You can see there's a little kind of a horseshoe shape in that plastic, and that's where that piece is going to fit down into that shape. Okay, know that, so that you're not on either side of those tangs there. Things not running right, you can't figure out why. Call it documentation if you want to. Just go slow and pay attention. Okay, 10mm was definitely not the right size. This seems to be a 3/8 headed bolt. And once you have those all the way loosened out of the motor, you can see that the carburetor is pretty well off. We've got one more piece of linkage right down here where my finger is. You're going to tilt your carburetor, being careful to pay attention, and just ease it right off of that rod. And yes, gas is probably going to come out of your carburetor. And once you get that rascal out of that hole, the carburetor is off. Okay, so this is what you're looking at. And there should be able to see a thick O-ring, black O-ring right here. Make sure you've got an O-ring. It may stay stuck depending on your motor inside here on the carburetor. It should be somewhere on there. Make sure that you've got one, and make sure that it's not cracked or broken, and make sure that it's clean when we put all this back together.